if we take a holiday, like the 4th of July, they forget how to put a car together on Monday. If we have an engine block to come down the assembly, in '89, when we came out with the common blocks, we had a number of 2.5s that ran off the end of the assembly line that were drilled for silent shafts that had no silent shafts put in. It's called mentality.
Just a manufacturing.
Human error. If you can create commonality where every goddamn thing that they do from the minute that they start to the minute that they leave is the same, you usually have a pretty defect-free line. You ever take an engine apart and look at the oil restrictor in the back of the block? You know what the oil restrictor was there for? We did that when we road raced, to keep the oil from pooling in the head. We had a passageway that's right alongside that front head bolt that was 10 millimeters, runs off the main oil galley, goes up and feeds the head. And at road race speeds, 5,800 RPM, 6 grand on a road race course, we had 4 quarts of oil that was in the head. And we're trying to run an engine and a turbo off of 1 quart in the system. It'll work. Created a lot of oil aeration too. Okay? So we came up with that little thimble design. And we said we're going to reduce that down. And that little thimble looks like, you know, Mom had a thimble when she sewed. It looks like a little thimble. And it had from a 10 millimeter hole, and a millimeter is 40 thousandths. So that hole was 400 thousandths in diameter. We put the thimble in there with 125 thousandths hole in it and reduced it considerably by 300 thousandths to restrict oil from getting upstairs. Okay? We went out to the Trenton Engine Plant assembly guys. Only turbo engines get this, guys. 85, we started it. All 84 Daytonas never had a restrictor in it, but at 85, only turbo 1 engines get it. So we get Kazawski, or whatever the hell that guy's name was. What's his name? Zakowski. We said, I want you to gather up a bunch of warranty motors and take these things all apart. We're going to do an analysis of them. These are motors that came back for warranty usage or whatever, and he laid them all out for us. You know, we'd go back in and do a qualitative analysis on them. We found out that half of these turbo 1s never even had the thimble in them. They didn't know a turbo 1 from a turbo 10. And they forgot totally, and then put them in carbureted cars, which didn't make any goddamn difference at all. They never saw above 3,000 RPM. So finally, we just came out with an implant, you know, change. Said put in all of them. It ain't gonna hurt nobody. So we just put the thimble in all of them. So that's the way. That's what we do with silent shafts.
So when I want to reduce my drag, increase my horsepower, you're recommending to take out the shafts and the chain, right?
One of the things you got to do.
Plug the bolt.
I need your paper.
Absolutely not.
You can't believe how retirees get so mistreated.
You do get a discount though, don't you? Not on probably replaced.
I'm not doing this to mention, but you can pretty well figure out what I'm doing here. Main caps, looking at the bottom of the block. Okay. Oil pump sits right in here. Main cap 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is the front of the engine. Okay. I can be looking at it like this right here. The main caps actually bolt in on some webbing that comes over like this. And on the front side of the block, there is about another 10 millimeter hole that sits right there. And then right outboard of it is another 10 millimeter hole that holds down the silent shafts. It's only on 1 and 2. When you take the silent shafts off, what you got to do is you got to block that hole up. And really, it's a 5/16 hole is about what it equates to. Okay. And you do it a couple different ways. If you got the engine on the engine stand, just tap the damn thing out, put a set screw in it. Okay. And just block it off. It goes up in an angle, goes up into the main oil galley of the block. If you're doing it in the chassis, easy way to do it is just get you a little piece of steel, rectangular piece of steel.
When these things dry out quick. Lick it a few times.
Keep the cap on.
Yeah, right. You get yourself a little rectangular piece of steel after you got the silent shafts off, and then just drill a hole down through it, put a bolt in it right there, put a little bit of RTV underneath of it, and let it just slide over the top of the hole. If you're going to do it in the chassis, follow me? Because you can't go up in there and tap it and have all those metal shavings in there. Now what else you're going to have to do where your chain is right here, you're going to have to go in there with, you don't want to take the front oil seal retainer off, because if you don't have the tools to pull that front pulley off, and to get this front oil seal retainer off, which is a real pain, you got to have a tool to do that. That chain sits right behind here in the gear. Just leave the gear on there. It's not going to hurt anything. It's not that parasitic. Go in there and get yourself a pair of chain cutters. And that's the only way you can do it. And just cut the chain right here and just drop all the silent shafts off. Okay? And that system works fine. You just gain 20 horsepower. Work great. Now, if you guys want to really make some horsepower,
Nah.
there's 4-bolt main caps for a 2522. There is such a trick. Billets. There is such one. Any questions on the common block?
May want to let me know what I did with mine. I got a 2.2 common block. I just put it in the 2.5 crank.
Do the same thing.
Same thing, you don't have to worry about blocking up the oil.
The ideal blocks that I try to go out and find when I build engines for you guys, I go to the core exchange. And I go out and find an 8922. It's a common block, but it's not drilled for silent shafts. So this oil hole's not here, and these holes are not there, but it's still a common block. It's already got a 2.2 crank in it. You know, you got to throw the crank away, come up with a 2.5 crank. There's an ideal block.
Just to let everybody know, Ed told me I should do that too when I rebuilt my engine, but I didn't because SDAC rules say you can't. So if you're going into racing for any reason like autocross, you can't use a 2.5 or a common block.
So Ed,
Only if you get caught.
Well, it's like anything else. You know, there's another proverb now too, John. You memorize this one. There's 2 that you got now, etched in your gray matter, right? What's the
Yep.
first one?
No such thing as magic in the can.
Right, second.
No substitute for cubic inches.
Right. The third one is what the eye sees, the mind perceives.
I would write that one down.
Okay? Write that one down. What the eye sees, the mind perceives. So if you guys are doing any kind of
Are you sure
competitive
you're not
racing,
paying you anything?
you're going to get on the podium. I built probably every damn SCCA neon motor going. Last year I had 7 out of the top 10 finished. Okay? I had 12 out of the top 15. This year I got tired of SCCA and I said, you guys go someplace else. Okay? But still, what I had to do to those motors was clandestine cheating. And that's the only way you're going to get on the podium. I hate to say that, okay? And I guarantee the Winston Cup boys are doing the same thing.
no.
No.
I hate to say that, but that's sometimes fact. Yes.
Just to highlight, the easiest way to identify a common block is to look for the fuel pump block-off plate is gone.
All right, if you guys are going to go out to the junkyard and you guys want visual identification on how to get out there, you know, of course you're going to read the VIN number on the car.
And you hope that the engine's still
And
original.
hope, right. Now, let's go back again. How am I going to do, what am I going to look at? The easiest way to look at it, now you might get confused now if it's an 86, 87, or 88, because it could be a tall block 2.5, okay? The tall block 2.5 has a lot of the common block characteristics. It doesn't have the good main caps. And the block is 12 millimeters taller, and you don't want it. Okay, stay away from that. But if you're out there and you got an 89, the easiest way to look at it is the back of the block, looking behind the back of the block down there alongside the water pump, okay? It will be casted flat back there, but where this one is made for an early style, and see the little dimples right here for the pan? The block on the early style 88 down will have those same corresponding dimples. Also, this early style block will have a fuel pump block-off plate on it, where the common block does not have the fuel pump block-off plate that sits right there. It'll just be round and casted over. Now, if you look at a common block 2.5, I'm sorry, if you look at a tall block 2.5, it too will be casted flat back here, but it will have a fuel pump block-off plate on it. Okay?
That's the key.
Yeah, you don't want it. But believe me, the torsional strength of this common block that gives you the ability to go either way, okay? And that's, what's the third proverb, John?
Wait, is it right here?
No, second proverb was no substitute for cubic inches.
With the eye sees, the mind perceives.
There you go. That's the third proverb.
Right.
What gives good? Seem like that made president?
It's drafted.
And, so you get a 2.2 or a 2.5.
By changing cranks and pistons. Yes.
So when we go out to the wrecking yard, we can look for even a 2.5 common block normally aspirated.
Sure, and that block is the same as a turbo, and the only thing you gotta do to it is here on the back of the block, right here, okay? You've got to drill a 23/32 hole for your oil return. Now, some of the late model 2.5s, I'm sorry, late model 2.2s, like your 89, are gonna have also cross drill. Okay? What is cross drill? We sit there and we look at the top of the bore. We're looking at the deck right straight from the top. We've got 4 pistons. The material between here and here is what we call Siamese. There is no coolant that flows between the cylinders. And this is why we have a problem in keeping our cylinder walls concentric around. Plus the head bolts that surround the boreholes. Are sitting, the threads are sitting right at the top of the block. So when we pull torque on the cylinder head, what we wind up doing, we look at the block from the side, and we got a bore right here, and we have a thread hole right here. Another thread passageway right here. And we put a bolt in there, right? And put a torque to it. What we actually do is we actually draw that cylinder wall material inboard to the threads on each side. Where does it happen at? If the piston is at top dead center, this area is about right here. And if our piston comes up, guess where our top ring sits? It's really more about like this here. Our second ring sits about here, and our oil ring sits about right there. Now instead of an end gap, we have a piston ring with an end gap on it. Of course, he's corrected it now with total seals. Okay. And we had some blow-by go past the piston ring end gap. Now what we've got is 4 spots in the cylinder, maybe 1,000 to 2,000 feet. They're about the size of your little fingernail. That sit right there alongside the head bolt, right there, and right there. And now all of our boost is going down in the pan. Because it's escaping here, plus the end gap. So we got 5 spots for all of our boost to go down in the pan. Now you remember me telling you the story about the guy with the Polaris dipstick? How many times have you guys seen your own dipstick come out? Rings that are wore out, we got blow-by, we got 11 pounds of boost going down in the pan. Something's gonna give. Could be a gasket, could be blow-by, could be whatever. How are we gonna correct all this stuff right here? I think it was 86, we did some studies to try to correct this Siamesing right here. We didn't want to change the structure of the block. So we went in and we said, okay, let's look at drilling it. And drilling from one side to the other at a 30-degree angle. Basically what we were doing, if we're sitting there with a cylinder bore, we're looking at the block now from the end and the bore's here in the center, okay? What we were going to do was, this is the front of the engine right here, this is the front, this is the rear. And really this is the right side of the motor. This is where the pulleys are down here in the front. We said, okay, we're going to go from the back side of the block, and we're going to drill a 30-degree hole, 30-degree angle hole, and we're going to use about a 5/32 drill bit, which is about the same as a 3mm, and we're going to come right across and go from one cooling passage to the other. So actually what we were doing, we were drilling from here at a 30-degree angle going down and intersecting the coolant that ran here and the coolant that ran here. And we made what they call steam ports. And the first ones that we did, we X'd it. We said, well, if one hole's good, two holes got to be better. So we drilled down here, and then we came over on this side, we crossed it, and we actually crossed in the center. I'll try to do that sometime. Because if you got a fixture holding this drill bit, the first one is easy. But when you intersect that hole and go in the opposite direction, all it has to be is a fraction off. You'll side load that drill bit, and that carbide bit just goes snap, and you throw a block away. You know? And we were subletting all the stuff at that time to Arrow Machine Shop up in Garden City, who was doing all of our early prototype 8722 blocks. In fact, they did all the wiper bolts for a while. So we went back and we did some studies. We put some thermocouples in there and some thermistors. And what we were actually seeing, without this cross drilling, we were actually seeing temperatures that had absorbed into this Siamese section of the block that were probably as much as 250 to 300 degrees Fahrenheit higher, because they were absorbing temperatures and acting as a heat sink. And what they were doing is they were distorting and creating the block cylinder wall now to be oval, in combination with the end gap and the 4 spots where we had blow-by. So now we had a cylinder wall that wasn't round anymore. See the monster that you created? Cylinder walls that are not round, 4 dime-sized spots from the cylinder head bolts, piston ring end gap.
Also, what happens when your cylinder walls go out of round like that, all your gaps will line up to the out of roundness.
Yes.
And
Boy,
for,
is that the truth.
and for every 1,000th of bore increase, you've increased your piston ring end gap 3.5.
So can you take a turbo one block?
Yes, I do it all the time. But don't ever let anybody talk into cross drilling. And you better have a fixture to do it with, okay? And you start out with a 5/32, okay? Or a 3mm drill bit. It's gotta be a long baby, because you're going down in at a 30-degree angle, and you're connecting. Actually, what you're doing now, the way the water flows off of a 2-2, and say this is the front of the engine, if here's where your water pump sits, okay? This is the back of the block. Do you know what that is? Let me write it.
That's out of the Turbo 3 motor.
It's not really supposed to be, but it got into a few. I know what that is? Have I ever seen it before?
The water pump holds the block, it helps black and store water going
It's supposed to go that way. Yeah. See it? I made these. These are son of a, your daughter here? These are son of a bitches to make. See the little blade? In '86, we found that we were diverting too much water back here, and we were not getting, of course, with the Siamesing, and we were not getting enough coolant around this way. And what we were getting was a number 3 cylinder that had a strong tendency to run a lot hotter than the other cylinders due to the coolant flow. And this number 3 cylinder always created a problem for us. So in production, we said, well, let's go and make some kind of a change in the water pump housing. Well, that's not easier said than done, you know. So we came up with this little thing. We designed this thing. Water diffuser. It sat in here in the opening, and actually what it did, it had this little angle tip on it like that. It brought now, instead of 2/3 of the water, you know, 2/3 of it going this way, we reversed it. And we brought 2/3 of it in this way. Okay? And it really worked great now, because if this is the front of the motor and we were cross drilling down like this, now we got cool water coming in, and it went into the bottom of the cross drill and came back up as a steam port, and it did what it was supposed to do. Okay? But we ran into problems. This was going to go into the 16-valve engine. The engine was built in Saltillo, Mexico. And even Mexico has some environmental concerns. And the one big environmental concern is you don't free apply silicone, because it's absorptive into the skin. This thing must be applied by a dispenser of some type, plus it created complexity in the assembly plant. We had potential warranty expense. We had the bean counters to dance us down. This thing was going to cost me about 27 cents to put into the engine. Okay? But I had environmental concerns now, because not only did I have the water pump that sat against it here with a rubber O-ring, I had to free apply silicone to the back side of this thing to make another seal. Now I got 60 thousandths additional thickness right here, and I'm side loading the water pump housing, so I had to come up with a corresponding, on the bottom bolt of the water pump housing, I had to come up with a corresponding 60 thousandths thick washer to go down on the bottom bolt. So I got two part numbers. I got overruled. These went into a box underneath the bench. And overruled, can't use it. Somehow, Roddy tells me he's got one of these on his motor. The Mexicans do strange things now. You're getting shit out of Mexico? They do the damnedest things you've ever seen. When we first transferred Ram Charger to Mexico, I've got to tell you why sometimes we are south of the border gentlemen think. I'm not being negative. They have a racial system similar to ours where one looks upon color with some negativism. And they have European Mexican, and you got the Mayan, the Aztec, you know, and it kind of goes down from there. And the darker the skin you are, sometimes the worse cast that you become. And they're always trying to better themselves, and when we moved Ram Charger down there, it kind of went down as a political move. And that was one of my first things where they said, Peter, you go to Mexico, you get that shit straight down there, because I rejected 322 Ram Chargers at the border. I worked for Dennis Pauly at the time, and you know who he is. He is a son of a bitch on quality. And I stopped him in Laredo, Texas, and said, these are not coming across the border, these vehicles are substandard, and nobody's ever stopped a train in their life before. I sent the train back to Mexico. What the hell's an assembly plant going to do with 323 goddamn Ram Chargers? They didn't have room to store two. Okay? Man, I thought I was going to get my ass run off like you've never seen. Okay? Well, anyway, that was my first tribute to Mexico. And I dealt with a guy by the name of Carlos Lobo, who looked like like a Mexican Dracula. This guy wore starch shirts, and I mean, he was about 6'5", and he had eyes that looked like a cat that could pierce right through. I've never seen eyes like that on a guy in my life. And we really won the war, because when he flew up, he chartered an airplane out of Mexico, flew all this whole plant people up. And we walked around the vehicles out there, and I mean, I had them with over 100 demerits per vehicle. Here, here, here. Didn't give him time to even talk. And we hit 10 cars, and he says, stop, Senior Peter, stop. He says, you just beat me in a 10-round fight, and I'll take them back, whatever I have to do with them. I don't know what the hell they did with them to this day. I don't know. But what I'm getting at is the Mexicans do strange things, and the one is they really try to make zero defect. And I'll never forget a time a mechanic called me on the phone when I was working out at Detroit. He says, Ed, he says, I can't get this transmission out. I said, what do you mean you can't get the transmission out? And he says, well, he says, I can't get the dipstick tube out that holds the dipstick for the transmission fill. Because you know you got to take that out right before you take the damn transmission out, because it won't clear the firewall. What are you talking about? He says, it won't come out. Can't get it out. I said, it's only in there with a rubber O-ring. You know, it's got a bolt that holds it to the side of the transmission case. I said, get a pair of goddamn vice grips in there and twist it, pull it. It won't come out. This is going on for 3-4 hours. Let's drop the damn valve body and get a chisel from the other end and beat that son of a bitch out. You know? We beat it out. And he overnight flew me the dipstick. And on the bottom inch of that dipstick was a complete sleeve of red Loctite. Okay? And what they did, they went upstairs in one of the inspector's rooms, got a 5-gallon bucket of Loctite. Whatever they used it for, I don't know, okay? Because they're not supposed to be using Loctite in the plant for nothing. They would dip those damn dipsticks, or not the dipstick tube, into that Loctite. And when the engine was stuffed into the chassis on the assembly line, there was 0 defects, no leaks from him, because he worked on the second shift, and the way Mexicans looked at anything, if you have any problems, you're fired, you're gone. And if you work on the assembly plant in Mexico for more than 90 days, you're hired for life. And down there, that's important. Okay? But that's kind of the way they think. Anyway, to go back to these things, I don't need to make a long story on nothing. To go back to these things, I had probably about 200 of them made. And I got overruled. Pete Counter says, can't put them in. But Rod's got a 91, tells me one of these is in his motor. So somebody went in underneath the bench. Did they have a washer down there? Thank God. Anyway, that's what that is.
There's also red Loctite to the block.
See, so you are. Spirit RT, right?
This little critter right there, if you're going to run performance, is pretty much of a necessity. You cannot buy it, there's no part number for it. Chrysler doesn't even acknowledge it. You never find it in any farm or pattern of any parts book. Okay? Anyway, I borrowed one of these before I left Mexico, and I made some patterns off of it, so they do work. They do reduce a lot of the problems, and they really make the steam ports work because they bring the water around through the front, and make it flow. One other trick you can do, if you guys are performance running a car, is our water pumps are very, very active. I mean, very active. They're there for, sitting in Houston climatic conditions where they really pump water. Another trick to make 3 horsepower. How many are we up to now?
I think like 25, 30, something like that.
Is the water pump. The water pump has 6 impeller blades on it. Okay? Okay? Is to cut each impeller blade off. And run it with 3. We do that on all the Neon road race motors.
It'll still work.
It works like a champ. It works like a champ.
110.
Yes, sir. And it works. Get a pair of ice grips and just literally just bend them and break them off, And that will give you right there 3 horsepower. I'm telling you some stuff now for you guys that are, real drag racers. That's a cheaper alternative than doing this stuff. And this was done by Speed Specialties down in Houston, where you do these reducer pulleys. How many times you see these advertised? These are only like $85, $95, okay? $85 to $95 to physically reduce the crank pulley and to physically reduce the water pump diameter to slow their speeds down. I'm right there, I'm looking at $200.
Yeah, but then you gotta get another belt and figure out all this stuff. I mean,
Been there, done that?
yeah.
What did I just show you right there?
Yeah, I just show you right there.
And how many of you guys called me up on the phone wanting to buy this crap?
The Mustang guys are psycho.
Oh!
March
Their pants are
pulleys.
wet. They love this stuff. The Mustang guys, they think this makes gobs of horsepower. It makes 3, $200.
It takes 40 minutes for the park guy to find a damn belt for it.
That's right. I couldn't tell you how many guys call me up on the phone wanting this stuff.
Do you sell it?
No. But I got it made for, this was made for a special purpose. Okay? Because not only do I do this,
Wouldn't it slow down your power steering pump speed too?
not if you keep the pulley on the back the same size.
Well, if you didn't, I mean.
Yeah. But I don't run power steering on a road race car.
Well, I know, because they're about as numb as.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's another 27 pounds and another 7 horsepower. Power steering.
I have like tanks.
Okay? Oh, yes. Now, do you really need to go to that? You guys asked me this stuff, and I'm showing you. Okay? There it is right there. All right. What else we got on blocks? Everybody get tired? Want to take a break?
No. You getting tired though, aren't
You
you?
need a drink of water.
All you gotta do is cook. Talk to them.
Want to talk about transmissions?
You should do a book that.
Want to talk about transmissions?
You have a shift lever for a transmission over there that looked exactly the same except one post is. I'm
Quick
curious.
shift.
about that.
Quick shift. Quick shift. Let me use all the nomenclature. A460, A465, 525, A520, 555, 568, 523, 568 again. That's all the numbers that Syracuse New Process Gear has made in manual transmissions, front-wheel drive. Okay. A460 was a 4-speed. A465 had the same ratios, 4-speed converted to 5. Okay. Nice wide ratios, great ratios. I loved them. And then in 1985, we changed them to the 525. And we went to a closer ratio. Okay? And the 525 stayed in all the L-body cars forever until they went out of existence. Stayed in the Daytona, Sundance Shadow, LeBaron, all the way up until 1986, 1987. We went to the A520. And the problem with the 525 down transmission was where the ring gear and the left bearing retainer was, where your left drive shaft goes in it, which is right about where your feet